Israeli Minister of Economy Nir Berkat says Hamas must be defeated.
What we saw October 7, the massacres, the killing, the raping of women, we have to make sure that these Nazis do not survive this war. Alignment of evil, the alignment of Iran and Qatar. Iran is giving arms and Qatar is funding public opinion. There have thousands of people working against Israel, against the free world, to try to eliminate us.
The Biden administration continues to distance itself from its once ironclad support of Israel.
On October 8th, the Biden administration could not have been clearer. Its support of Israel as it responds to the massacre of the 7th is set in stone and unmovable. But pressure from the U.S. hard left has softened the resolve of the administration to the point where late last week, spokesman Admiral John Kirby said this.
What we want to see are some real changes on the Israeli side. You know, if we don't see changes from their side, there'll have to be changes from our side.
That's specifically in response to the accidental killing of World Central Kitchen aid workers in Gaza during a strike. Tony Perkins of Family Research Council said the U.S. should be holding firm.
The United States needs to be putting the pressure on the right entity here, and it's not Israel. Can they do things better? Absolutely, but these things happen, unfortunately, in war.
But he says the hardening rhetoric is sending the opposite message.
This shows the continued evolution of the Biden administration moving away from our ally Israel.
The Biden administration has been trying to leverage a perceived weakening of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's support in Israel. Perkins is not buying it.
I was there recently. I saw no cracks in his support. In fact, I think the more agitation that you have from the West, in particular from the United States, the more solid his standing is in Israel.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
Once again, Joe Biden is attempting to let people off the hook for student loans, even though the Supreme Court already ruled that he has no authority to do so. Fox News legal consultant Greg Jarrett says Biden is desperately trying to buy votes.
Well, 11 states have coalesced to file two different lawsuits to block this latest plan by Joe Biden. One has already been filed in Kansas, another forthcoming in the state of Missouri. And their arguments are principally going to be the same as their last successful challenge. Because, you know, Joe Biden here is buying votes. So desperate to get young people to reelect him. You know, he's really willing to undermine both Congress and the Supreme Court. The new plan, like the old one, is not just illegal, it's grossly unfair. Forgiving debt helps those who went to college at the expense of those who didn't. But it also punishes students and parents who scrupulously saved for years to pay for college without loans.
The trial begins today against BNSF Railway over the lung cancer deaths in northwestern Montana. Jeff Manasso reports.
Two wrongful death lawsuits accuse BNSF Railway and its corporate predecessors of storing asbestos-laden vermiculite in a large rail yard in Libby, Montana, before the material was shipped to plants to be processed into insulation. Plaintiffs say the railway failed to contain the toxic dust, allowing it to be blown around town without warning. BNSF is expected to argue that there's no proof the men were exposed to asbestos levels above federal limits, that their medical conditions were not caused by the railway. The human and environmental disaster in Libby has led to civil claims by thousands of residents and other pending court cases. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Stocks are drifting in quiet trading after last week's roller coaster end left them shy of their records. The S&P 500 down 0.1%, the Dow Jones Industrial Average down 23 points, and the Nasdaq Composite is 0.1% higher. The focus on Wall Street has been on interest rates and when the Federal Reserve will lower them. American Family News is online at afn.net and on the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Pete.
AFR programming is now available on Alexa.
You're joking, right?
Nope, not joking.
Seriously?
Yep, this is not a drill.
Wait a minute. No way.
There's a way. The Alexa way. So if you just happen to miss your favorite shows, no worries. You can now listen to each podcast with Alexa. It's simple and it's free. Just visit afr.net/apps and click Alexa. We're not joking. we inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to The Core here on American Family Radio. At The Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. We are your host each week here on the program on the American Family Radio Network, broadcasting in on over 170 stations across 30 plus states, and on the internet, the World Wide Web, as it has been called over the decades. So if you're not within one of our FM signals, you can still get us online at afr.net and on the AFR app. We have the video up each day on streaming.afa.net, streaming.afa.net, and on our Facebook page at The Core on Facebook. You can watch the show there as well when we're live each weekday. Well, we had a good trip over to small town Sylacauga, Alabama, and had the AFA retreat there last week on Wednesday, arrival on Wednesday, all day Thursday, Friday, and departure on Saturday. So we had a really good time with our supporters over there. Shout out to everyone who met us over there at Purcell Farms, Christian family-owned resort there, and we had just a really good time of fellowship and encouragement. And the battle continues. The war for the soul and the heart of our country and for biblical values continues. And the war for the heart and the soul of individuals continues as well. And that's what drives our work. It's not just central to our work, but it drives our work. And that is the advancement of the gospel. You know, I believe it was George Washington that talked about, in essence, how America's purpose on the world stage is for the propagation of the gospel. So this wasn't just about, man's liberty or man's physical prosperity. Although those things have a place, it wasn't just about the Bill of Rights. The fight for independence was about having a culture, a society, a Christian culture that's primary purpose will be the propagation of the gospel. And if you miss that, you've missed the founding of our nation. And when we talk about teaching all of America's history, not just parts of it, that includes teaching that part. I mean, when was the last time you were taught in school in our public education system that the founding of America was about the propagation of the gospel of Jesus Christ? I mean, raise your hand if you heard that in third grade history class, if there's even history class in third grade. I think we need to start them younger, by the way. Like, start history class, start them young. When is it too early to teach our children why we are here and how we got here? Well, I would say if they can talk and understand, it's not too early. But I'm just curious. I mean, did you hear the George Washington quote about the reason America exists for the propagation of the gospel? I know I didn't. I didn't learn that till I went with Stephen McDowell to Washington, D.C. on a spiritual heritage tour with my dad. So there's just a lot there. Our nation's history is rich. And we need to teach all of our history, the good and the bad. And that ends the squabble over what monuments get to stay. What part of our history stays in the history books? Let's teach all of America's history, and let's don't cancel historical figures because they had one thing in their past that we didn't like. Because if that were the case, we would now have no historical monuments because we could nitpick them to oblivion. And so, speaking of propagating the gospel, let's turn our attention to Scripture. Psalm 107 is where we are this week. And am I right, Bobby, or are we 108? 107? I thought so. So Psalm 107, the travel throws me for a loop. So we're in Psalm 107. We were in 106 last week. And I want to read just a few verses here about the redeemed. So, of course, this is Old Testament. This is First Testament. This is the Jewish era, if you will. God's chosen people. So that's the context here. But the Lord is still in the business of redeeming people. And through Jesus, salvation is offered to the world. And so keep that in mind here. But nonetheless, Psalm 107. Let the redeemed of, verse 1, oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his loving kindness is everlasting. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he has redeemed from the land of the adversary, and gathered from the lands from the east to the west, from the north to the south. So talking about the now redeemed, the writer here says that they wandered in the wilderness in a desert region. They did not find a way to an inhabited city. They were hungry and thirsty. Their soul fainted within them. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them out of their distress. He led them also by a straight way to go to an inhabited city, a city with life, that is. Verse 8, let them give thanks to the Lord for his loving kindness and for his wonders to the sons of men. For he has satisfied the thirsty soul, and the hungry soul he has filled with what is good. Verse 9. So we were all, everyone who is redeemed was once lost. That's just how it works. How can you be found if you were never lost? How can you be redeemed if you were never lost? And so the Lord, everyone who's a believer, the Lord has redeemed, and the Lord is still in the business of redemption. And that's what makes Christianity the most welcoming, inclusive, diverse. You hear all my buzzwords here? Your alarm bells are going off. Those are bad words. Well, for some people they are, because they take God's character, they take his word, and they twist it, and they create their own gods and their own religions and their own falsehoods and their own idols. But if, just like justice, there's man's justice and there's God's justice. And the same could be said about equality. There's God's equality and there's man's equality, and they're not the same. They can be. We can line them up if we need to, if we desire to, but in many cases, they're not the same. Every man, woman, and child, and yes, there are only two sexes, man and woman. The great equalizer, God is the great equalizer. And his creation, his created order, the destiny he has set for us is the great equalizer. And that is, we're all going to end up in one of two places. You're either going to end up in Hades or hell or heaven, eternity with God. And it doesn't matter your economic class, middle class, blue collar, white collar, all these different socioeconomic categories that we bundle people into, and how much good does that actually serve our society by bundling and labeling people into these man-made categories? For what end and what purpose, I have no idea. But we're all going one of two places, folks. And if you don't think that heaven is real, if you don't think that God himself is real, look at the evil that is plaguing our world today. It's unavoidable. When you look at the evil that is plaguing our world, you cannot honestly leave that assessment and say that there is no God. There is no moral right way to do things. I want to shift gears the last few minutes we have here. And speaking of evil, I want to play clip 3. This is a group of pro-Hamas protesters having a rally, not in Iran, not in Iraq, not in Syria. This is in Dearborn, Michigan. Listen to the death to America chants, the death to Israel chants, and the pure hatred coming from this speech. Clip 3.
Malcolm X said, and I quote, "We live in one of the rottenest countries that has ever existed on this earth. It's not Genocide Joe that has to go. It's the entire system that has to go. Any system that would allow such atrocities and such devilry to happen and would support it, such a system does not deserve to exist on God's earth." And so when these fools ask us if Israel has the right to exist, the chant "Death to Israel" has become the most logical chant shouted across the world today.
There you have it. That's, once again, Dearborn, Michigan. I talked a few weeks ago about how Michigan, the Democrats have a Michigan problem, is what I said. And then you could also extrapolate that to Minnesota and other places. But nonetheless, this is what happens when you have a pluralistic, globalistic view and a non-Orthodox Christian view of humanity and immigration. And for that matter, a non-America first view of everything I just described there. And when you're a globalist or you're a Democrat and you have opened the door to unlimited mass migration, which is what the Democrats have done. This has been a years-long battle. Then you can't say no to the Hamas sympathizing immigrant who wants to come to America, because after all, anyone who opposes any type of immigration is automatically called a bigot and a hater and un-American and you of no heart. How dare you oppose immigration? I mean, we're the land of the Statue of Liberty. We welcome all, they say. But in reality, folks, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. America is set up to host people who love our country and who love our values. And I don't want anyone in this nation that does not fit into that criteria. And we can get into religious tests and should we let Muslims in? And that's a very viable discussion, not completely off the table. But to keep things more surface at this point in the discussion with the music playing, we should not allow people into this nation that do not love our nation, love our history, love our people, and love our Constitution. That's the criteria at a minimum. We could discuss further if we need to. Loyalty to America and a denouncing of the Islamic Jihad and un-American value system that is set up in the Middle East that has led to the oppression of Christians all around this world. We'll be back in a few.
For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For the body does not consist of one member, but of many. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Look briefly at one of your fingers. You've just witnessed one of the greatest displays of God's creative intent there is. No other person in all the world, even an identical twin, shares your fingerprint. God specifically designed each of us to be unique. That means we shouldn't try to carbon copy anyone else in the Christian faith. If God made you an arm in his body or a kneecap, praise be to our glorious God for drawing us to become a part of his body. How freeing it is to realize that we were never meant to copy anyone but Jesus.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
And my father, your great-grandfather, fought in World War II.
Really?
He was a gunner on the big ship out in the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
Your great-grandmother did her part, too.
Was she on a ship?
Oh, no. She stayed back home. She and a lot of her friends worked really hard in a factory because the men had gone off to war.
Ooh.
And they held scrap metal drives to help in the war effort. The folks back home were heroes, too.
Here at the American Family Association, we consider you the heroes back home. As you fulfill your responsibility of caring for your family day to day, your partnership with us is crucial as we fight the enemies of freedom in America. Thank you for your commitment to the American Family Association.
Grandpa, what's a scrap metal drive?
Let's get some cookies, and I'll tell you all about it.
Proverbs 13:22 tells us it's good to have something to pass down to your grandchildren. That legacy could be in the form of highlighting in your Bible, or it could be in your record of charitable giving. One way to support your family in the years ahead is through the AFA Foundation. By supporting the ministry of the American Family Association, you can support your own family as well as countless others around the world. The AFA Foundation can help you with responsible asset management, which can promote your faith and values. If you're looking for a way to do the most for others, a representative at the AFA Foundation can assist you with estate planning, beneficiary designations, charitable gift annuities, and much more. Why not set something in motion that will affect others for generations to come? Contact the AFA Foundation at 800-326-4543, extension 345. Find us on Facebook or email foundation@afa.net. As God has blessed you, you can bless others through the AFA Foundation.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to The Core here on American Family Radio. Glad to have you with us today on the program. Walker Wildmon here on At the Core, and it's our Monday edition live. We have our Share-a-thon this week. We're going to kick it off tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., bright and early on American Family Radio, so you'll not want to miss out on that, and we need you to come alongside us as we do 6 days out of the year, 3 days in the fall, 3 days in the spring. And so tune in to Share-a-thon and donate to our Share-a-thon. We would not be here without your prayers and your financial support. So stick around tomorrow. Make sure you tune in and listen to Share-a-thon and join this team effort with thousands of listeners around the country to help support American Family Radio. Jumping to our guest, we have Trent England with us. He's an attorney, legal scholar, and founder of SaveOurStates.com. And they are working on a litany of issues, but the one we're going to talk about today is the Electoral College. Hey, Trent, welcome to the Core.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here. Thanks.
Good. We got you loud and clear. Trent, before we jump into this Electoral College discussion, which some people may be needing a cup of coffee to keep them awake, but no, this is a very it sounds boring, but it's fascinating. It goes back to the founding of our country, and it is a critical element of electing the President of the United States. So I don't want people to miss this. I want them to pay attention because there's a lot going on this topic. But before we jump into that, give us a little background about your work and how you ended up in this arena.
Yeah, I've been interested in the Constitution and our system of states going back to when I was in college back in the 1990s and learned about the Electoral College back then and was really interested in this whole system. Then we had the 2000 election. Obviously, that made the Electoral College a little bit controversial. And eventually it led to this campaign that I work against called the National Popular Vote Campaign that's trying to manipulate the Electoral College basically out of existence. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. And so I created Save Our States to make the case specifically against this National Popular Vote plan, but also more broadly for the Electoral College. As you say, it's this is a core part of our Constitution, of our system of checks and balances. And yet we, like a lot of parts of our Constitution, we have come to take it for granted. So Save Our States we produced a documentary. I've written a book. We work with another scholar named Tara Ross, who's even written a children's book about the Electoral College, trying to explain why this matters so much.
Trent, let me ask you this. Most of us would look at this issue and think that the Electoral College is secure. It's not going to go anywhere, like we view maybe the Bill of Rights and other parts of our founding documents, and what guides us. But to assume that and to state that is rather naive. There is a movement afoot, and you just cited it, to ditch the Electoral College, and they'll come up with all their fancy reasons. They want to go on the popular vote, the will of the people, in air quotes. That's thoroughly problematic. So bring us back to our founding fathers, why we have the Electoral College, so that we can appreciate the way we operate today.
Yeah, when the founders got together to write the Constitution, they knew they wanted an executive branch, but they were not even sure what that looked like. To the fundamental question of, would it be one president, or would you have some kind of a council? Would that person serve for life? Would the person serve for just, a 1-year term? There were people who thought that any elected office, the longest anybody should ever serve is just 1 year, right? So, and then there were other people who said, well, look at these monarchies. They're stable, and, at their best, at least, that seems to be a good form of government. So maybe we should have a president serve for life. So, very quickly they decided it should be one person, and that person should not serve for life, but should be able to be reelected. And then the question of, how do you elect this person? The obvious answer at the time was to have a kind of parliamentary system, which would mean Congress would elect the president. That was the default. It was in the Virginia plan. And so that's really the background. Some people think that, well, if we didn't have the Electoral College, the founders would have, written a popular vote, a direct election into the Constitution. That is something they debated, but the default was always a parliamentary system, which, by the way, that's what most of the major, quote unquote, democracies around the world use. They don't use a national popular vote for, the top executive position. A lot of them still have a king that has a little bit of power, and then they have or a queen, and then, they have a prime minister elected by their parliament, essentially their legislature. The founders didn't like that idea because they wanted separation of powers. They wanted the executive to be separate from the legislature. So you have to have the executive chosen by somebody other than the legislature. Now, if you want that separation, and you need the separation to create the checks and balances. I mean, this is all kind of the nitty-gritty details of the Constitution that are all designed to protect our rights and limit the federal government. So what they came up with was, once they had hashed out Congress, well, let's have this other system that uses the same math as Congress. Every state has as many presidential electors as it has members of the House and Senate. And then from there, we'll just let the state legislatures decide how to choose these presidential electors. They can have a vote of the people. They can choose them themselves. They'll decide how to represent their state in the Electoral College. The electors will meet in their state according to rules established by Congress. They'll meet in their own state. They never meet all together, and they will cast their state's votes for president. The founders didn't call this the Electoral College. They didn't really call it anything other than the mode of electing the president. But we came to call it the Electoral College pretty quickly. And it was modified slightly in the 12th Amendment after the famous tie between Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson. That gave us voting separately for president and vice president. But otherwise, the system has stayed the same since the beginning of our country. This is the way we've elected presidents since George Washington.
There's a move right now to abolish the Electoral College, and it really gained attention after Hillary Clinton was beat. Of course, the left began pushing it. But when they win, Trent, once again, we're talking to Trent England with Save Our States. When the Democrats win, Trent, they don't talk about it very much. At least not, they don't make a big deal about it. They're still probably pushing to ditch it, but it really seems to hit a fever pitch when their candidate gets beat at the presidential level every few cycles. So how popular is this movement? I mean, is this like a fringe thing on the left, or have they actually gained some momentum?
They have gained some momentum. I think that the difference between 2016 and 2000, in 2000 was almost a jump ball election, right? The result of that election could have changed based on a rainstorm, right? Changing who turned out to vote. So everybody recognized, and Al Gore actually thought that he might win the Electoral College and lose the popular vote, that there was some scuttlebutt ahead of the election about that. So 2000 kind of gave partisans on the left a reason to grouse about the Electoral College. But in 2016, Hillary Clinton lost because the Electoral College worked exactly the way it's supposed to work. And I think this is an important point for people to wrap their minds around. It wasn't a misfire. It wasn't, unfortunately, every once in a while, the Electoral College does this crazy thing. The founders wanted the Electoral College or a system like this, right? A two-step democratic process, because it makes it so that you can't run a regional campaign. You can't win just because you have support in a few big states or a few giant cities. You actually have to have a relatively broad coalition across the United States. Hillary Clinton decided, because a lot of folks in the mainstream media told her she couldn't lose, she decided to kind of coast at the end of the campaign, go, hang out with her high-rolling donors out in California rather than trying to earn votes in Wisconsin and Michigan. And she lost. And again, she lost because the system worked exactly the way it was supposed to work. That left partisan Democrats who I think, for sort of, short-term kind of sour grapes reasons, saying, we just got to do whatever we can to get rid of the Electoral College. Missing the fact that our country really is better off if presidents have to build this broad coalition. Hillary Clinton would have been a better candidate if she would have been willing to spend time in middle America in places that weren't already, completely supportive of her candidacy. So, no, you're right. That's what we've seen in this fight.
Trent, let me ask you this: number one, to your point, the Electoral College, when you look at the county by county or precinct by precinct, well, let's just say county by county. There's thousands of precincts, but county by county, when you look at the vote for president and even for Congress, it's a huge red map. I mean, it's a huge Republican-dominated map from a congressional standpoint. You look at the Senate; it's a little bit different, but America is largely red from a county standpoint and from a broad swath of America standpoint. You have these major population centers that vote 70-80% Democrat, and that's what moves a lot of states. I mean, you think about Atlanta, Fulton County, you go up to Pennsylvania, you have Philadelphia and other areas. But what I wanted to get your thoughts on is Nebraska. This has been in the news recently. This may be a big nothing burger, I don't know, but Nebraska is considering shifting to a winner-take-all instead of a split electoral college breakdown. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I've had a lot of respect for both Nebraska and Maine using the power that they have as a state to, adjust how they allocate presidential electors to bring more attention to their states. It doesn't make sense in every state to do that, but in states like that, they're small. And, they basically, in each state, they've got one swing district, and they've said, well, we're going to award presidential electors at the district level. That, again, it attracts a little more attention to their state. It's not my place to tell Nebraska what to do. But I do think it's, when partisans sort of say, well, we want to adjust the system, because maybe that gives us in this case, the slightest little partisan advantage for Republicans. I think it's kind of short-term thinking. the odds that the election is going to come down to a single electoral vote is pretty minute. And it's always frustrating to see partisans say, well, we want to change the rules just for partisan advantage and for no other reason. So that's my comment on Nebraska. I actually think their system has worked out pretty well for them since they've been using it.
Yeah, fascinating discussion, and we'll see this system fully deployed in November of this year, and hopefully get the results of the election within hours and not days or weeks. But we'll see how it goes. Hey, Trent, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate your insight into the Electoral College.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, that's Trent England with Save Our States. He's also an attorney and legal scholar. Founded that organization, by the way, Save Our States, and they do a lot of work on the Electoral College. If it wasn't for the Electoral College, there would have been no Trump presidency. And you could go back in history and see the breakdown there and how many presidents won the Electoral College and didn't win the popular vote. But these, if you want to see the what I would call the disenfranchisement that would take place should you ditch the Electoral College, I mean, look at let's just say Pennsylvania. I mean, Philadelphia dominates the popular vote just because they're a mega population center. So despite the fact that I don't know the exact numbers, but let's just say 70 to 80% of counties in Pennsylvania, if not more, are Republican-controlled counties and congressional districts, but Philadelphia teeters the scale and tips it over the edge for the Democrats at the presidential level. I mean, you talk about having a lot of people and a large portion of the state that don't agree with the politics of the Democrat, but then they send a Democrat to the White House. So that's what a ditching of the Electoral College would end up doing, is it would permit these mega population centers to dominate the presidency in the White House and really ultimately lead to one-party rule, is what it would do, which would not be good for our country. Moving on back to the topic of Israel and what's going on over there. The White House and Biden have been giving Israel just a hard time. I mean, this is embarrassing. I talked about this a little bit last week, but we had Chuck Schumer I played the clip back a few months ago. He's on the Senate floor, maybe a month ago, but he was talking about how Netanyahu and Israel needs to have another election because people are unhappy with Netanyahu. And he was engaging in foreign election interference, which is what the Democrats accused Trump of. Schumer was engaging on that, but not on a phone call. He was engaging in that on the Senate floor. And the White House has been weak on the Israel issue. They were strong for the first few weeks, but now they've just been wavering in recent months. And this really hit a fever pitch when Israel incidentally or accidentally struck a aid convoy of a NGO, non-governmental organization, delivering food to people in Gaza. And Israel misidentified the vehicle, struck the vehicle, and killed civilians. Tragically, I think 3 civilians were killed, 3 aid workers. So very tragic situation. Nothing to be proud of. Shouldn't have happened. No excuses. And Israel came out and said just as much. And they actually disciplined, I believe, 2 service members in Israel because of that misfire. And the U.S. has been just throwing a fit over this and the situation in Gaza. And Fox brought this up about what happened when U.S. service members struck and killed 7 children in Afghanistan during the withdrawal. So when we get back from the break, we'll play that clip, talk briefly about that, and jump to our next guest. We'll be back in a few.
So for God to speak is for God to engage in self-revelation. We only know God because God has condescended to speak to us.
The God Who Speaks is a 90-minute documentary that answers many of the common objections about the Bible's reliability. The film equips believers to confidently base their lives on the power of God's Word. It's available at streaming.afa.net.
Real-life heroes don't look like the ones in the movies. Mark Nichols doesn't wear a cape. He's a business owner in a small Arkansas town who took a stand when his local library opened their children's section to the radical LGBTQ agenda. When you give today to AFA Action, you're helping to protect the innocence of children. We'll also give you a free copy of Mark's story. It's the latest DVD in our Impact series. Visit afaaction.net today. afaaction.net.
Hey 8 Days of Hope family, this is Hannah Fletcher, your Communications Director. Every year, we are thrilled to see where God moves us as we love and serve those in need across the country, sometimes on a moment's notice. It can be hard to keep up when our Rapid Response Ministry is serving hurricane victims in one state, while our Safe House Ministry is building a facility of refuge in another. Today, I am excited to share with you about how you can stay up to date on all the ministry is doing through text. That's right, texting. Right now, you can text the word HOPE to 86373 to join our text alerts. You'll be notified anytime God calls us to love and serve the brokenhearted through rebuilding, rapid response, mass feeding, or safe house construction. It's that simple. Text HOPE, that's HOPE, to 86373. We can't wait to share updates with you soon.
The British writer Logan Pearsall Smith once wrote, "Don't laugh at a young person for his changing behaviors. He's only trying on one face after another till he finds his own." It's sometimes amusing to watch young people search for their identity, but it is not amusing to see adults doing the same thing. To discover who we are, we have to ask the only one who knows, the God who created us. And God knows every man, woman, and child intimately and wants to say, first of all, "You are my child. Now let me help you discover who I created you to be." This is David Jeremiah encouraging you to get on the road to new life. Discover who God created you to be on Route 66.
Route 66, driving the word home. Log on to Route66Life.com. Start your journey home today.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio with your host, Walker Wildmon.
Welcome back to The Core here on American Family Radio. Before we jump to our guest, I want to play this clip briefly. It's about 2 minutes long. But remember, the U.S. military accidentally struck a vehicle with 7 children in it. And there was supposedly a terrorist in it as well during the Afghanistan withdrawal. And there was zero disciplinary action that we're aware of, according to the White House, when that happened. And the media moved on from it pretty quickly within a couple of days. But Israel did the same thing, and it just was a 24/7 news cycle, and Israel needs to be punished, and the Biden must do something about it. So just listen to this back and forth and the real hypocrisy from the Biden White House compared to Afghanistan versus what happened in Israel or in Gaza with the Israeli military. Let's listen.
So there were 7 children that were killed by that U.S. Hellfire missile.
Yeah.
No accountability, you said, was part of the plan. So why is this so different than what we did there?
Well, look, these are events that happened 3 years apart, 2 different geographic locations, 2 different countries, 2 different sets of circumstances, 2 different types of threat that were being evaluated, and completely 2 different militaries that were involved with 2 different chains of command. So I think we got to be careful comparing both events too closely. We, too, had an independent investigation, Martha, of that incident. And that independent investigator found that there was no need for personal accountability to be had, but did find that the U.S. military needed to make some systemic changes, procedural changes in how we looked at intelligence and acted on that intelligence. The Israelis, similarly, have said the same thing about this event this week with the WCK strike, that they're going to make some systemic changes. Now we're glad to hear that, and we're going to be watching to see what those changes are and how they can put them into effect. But these are two different events.
They're not that different, though, John.
I know. I understand that the outcome. I get the outcome.
But why? So this was a trigger moment, it appears, for the White House, because obviously that the momentum has been building to take a harder line against Israel and their tactics. But this was the event that really pushed things over the edge. And so why is it so different in terms of what Israel carried out in the midst of war? And, you know, these aid workers, and my heart breaks for them as it does for the 7 children who were with this man underneath this Hellfire missile.
Indeed.
But the aid workers know that they are in a war zone and that they are taking a tremendous risk at risk of their own safety.
Yeah, well, first, again, two different incidents. I understand that there's similarities here, but it would be, I think, imprudent to try to compare two things that happened 3 years apart in two different conflicts. That said, the Israelis have said that they made a mistake here. They have come clean about what happened, and we're going to be looking at their report to see what we think of it as well. And they said that they're going to improve. They need to improve the deconfliction processes with aid workers, and that's going to be important going forward.
So Israel, responsibility, Israel, they must answer Israel. But when the U.S. does it under the Biden administration, when they kill not 3 aid workers, but 7 children on a strike on a vehicle that wasn't supposed to be targeted, John Kirby came out in 2021, late 2021, and said, look, there's going to be no disciplinary action. We've rolled out disciplinary action on these service members. So, and we never really found out where the breakdown was and why we struck a vehicle with 7 children in it in Afghanistan. But you see the hypocrisy and the complete different standard there. And John Kirby, we can't compare. We can't compare. Yeah, we can. It's a very, very similar setup of circumstances. And one was U.S. service members and the other was Israelis. And the Israelis, like I mentioned, they have punished and disciplined those service members, and they released a full report explaining the confusion and how they made a mistake. But the U.S., no, not the same set of standards. Jumping to our next guest, we have on with us the Agricultural Commissioner from the state of Mississippi, Andy Gipson. He's on with us. He's been a guest of the program before. Commissioner Gipson, welcome back to the Corps.
Well, good afternoon. Great to be back. Thank you, Walker, for having me.
Absolutely, we appreciate your work in the area of agriculture. Mississippi is a big agriculture state. Makes up a large portion of our economy. Let's talk about a few pieces of legislation. The Mississippi legislature is in the next few weeks wrapping up their session. This is one of the extended sessions, so a lot taking place, and a lot of these topics have implications in other states as well. But let's talk first about the Mississippi Farm Bureau bill. That's what it's being called. Bring us up to speed on that one.
Yeah, this is a bill that has been discussed for quite some number of years. A lot of states around us, including Tennessee and Arkansas, have had these Farm Bureau plan health insurance bills and legislation that authorizes nonprofit agricultural membership organizations to form private health insurance, basically, for their members. And this was really an issue that took on a lot of steam after Obamacare passed years ago, in a way to find an affordable health insurance option, private health insurance that's not subject to all the Obamacare regulations and mandates. And it's been successful in other states. Tennessee has had a really good plan available to all Farm Bureau members. We call it the Farm Bureau plan, but it's actually available to any nonprofit agricultural membership plan, group. So what it's going to do is create more competition in the health insurance market here in Mississippi. Now, the bill, Senate Bill 2851, has already passed the Senate and the House, and it is now, it appears, on its way to the governor's desk. So I've been supportive of this for a number of years. In fact, I've been speaking on it at all of my key speaking engagements for the last several years, supporting this. I'm glad to see the legislature passing this, and I think it's going to create a new health insurance option that frankly, we've just never had in Mississippi up until this happens. It will be open to members of the nonprofit. So if you're a Farm Bureau member, you will be eligible for this. As you know, Farm Bureau already has property insurance coverage through its affiliates. This is going to create a health insurance option. It's a huge deal, and it's a great thing for the state of Mississippi and for our people.
Yeah, I'm a Farm Bureau member on my property front, auto, etc. So Commissioner Gipson, before we move to the second subject of farmland and how the laws regulating it, would this mean if you already are with Farm Bureau or another farm insurance type setup company, would you be able to do this, or is this for just if you're a farm family or in the agricultural industry?
It's going to be available to any member of the agricultural association. So
Okay.
you don't just have to be a farmer, but to be a member of this farm group, agricultural group, and that it would include Farm Bureau. Any member would be able to participate in this. It's not going to be subject to the mandatory, coverages that Obamacare has mandated that's made health insurance basically double in cost the last 10, 12 years. But it will provide some very good coverage, basic coverage that most people need. And frankly, this is a huge deal, not only for the membership group, but it's a huge deal for the farmers. So if you're a farmer out there, you need to understand this is going to provide an option for you to have health insurance so you can continue working on the farm at the same time as you have good health insurance coverage. So in my view, not only is it a good policy for creating more competition in our health insurance markets, but it's good policy for agriculture, which, as you mentioned, is the state's largest industry. It's the backbone of our economy. One of the challenges for young farm families in particular to continue working farms is how are they going to have health insurance? So a lot of people have had to go get health insurance through another job. This is going to create an avenue that we've not had in Mississippi before to keep the farms working and keep our families covered with health insurance, private health insurance that's not Obamacare mandated federal overreach, as you and I both know, that has contributed to the exorbitant cost of health insurance in that realm. So my kudos, applause to the Mississippi legislature for getting this bill across the finish line, and I'm certainly optimistic that the governor will sign it into law.
Yeah, this kind of competition is critical, and it's a no-brainer. It's a very creative idea, but it's also a no-brainer to bring the costs down across the board through competition, though, through private sector competition instead of government welfare. So hopefully this gets signed by the governor and we can replicate this. I know you said it's already in place in other states, but we can replicate it in more as well. And Commissioner Gipson, once again, we're talking to Agricultural Commissioner Andy Gipson from the state of Mississippi. China purchasing farmland, or even any other foreign adversary for that matter, purchasing America's agricultural farmland. This has been taking place for years now, but has gained much attention over the past few years. Tell us about this, bring us up to speed on this subject, and then we can talk about what Mississippi's attempting to do about it.
Well, we've been looking at this issue for a number of years now. We've seen in recent years the emphasis in some of the press around the country. Your own stations cover this increasing amount of foreign investors, foreign countries in some cases, coming in here and buying up American farmland. Mississippi is no exception to that. We've seen dramatic increases across America, increases as much as 20 or 30% from the prior 10 years in ownership of foreign investors buying up farmland in our country. And it has created such a concern because in a lot of states, including in Mississippi, the law actually prohibits that from happening. So there's been laws on the books in multiple states that were supposed to keep this from happening, but somehow through the formation of shell companies or LLCs or other entities that are disguising the true ownership of the purchasers, these foreign governments or foreign controlled entities have come in here and started buying up farmland. In Mississippi, I served as chairman of the committee that studied this last year, and we found that almost 1 million acres of our own farmland, the most fertile and productive soil in the world, 1 million acres is owned by foreign-controlled entities or foreign governments in some cases. Now, some of these entities and governments are, we might consider friendly nations, but some of them are not. And the laws that have been on the books in Mississippi for nearly 100 years would prohibit any foreign, non-resident alien foreigners from buying up our land, any land. But that law that's been on the books has never been enforced. There's not been an enforcement mechanism. So you have countries like the Netherlands that's come in and bought, almost 400,000 acres of Mississippi forest land. You've got China that has purchased farmland in Mississippi. We know this because USDA has been tracking it since the 1970s, and these reports are available. And as increasing amounts have been purchased, it's becoming the public awareness, and we are beginning to see many states respond to this. I think 22 or 23 states the last couple of years have enacted laws to crack down on this and keep our countries around the world from buying our farmland, which is, in my view, a very serious threat to our food security. We need to keep American agriculture American. We need to keep Mississippi agriculture Mississippi. And I appreciate our legislature looking at this, and they do have a bill that's making it through the process. It's Senate Bill 2519. It would create some enforcement mechanisms. It specifically bans majority ownership by our enemy countries, such as China, Russia, any country listed on the United States Department of State as an enemy adversary nation. They would be banned from owning a majority interest. It doesn't extend to other nations. So, I'm still looking at this bill, trying to see the ramifications of it, but it looks like this bill is going to make it through the process, and hopefully it'll be a step in the right direction. We want to make sure that we keep our agriculture, our greatest asset as a country, American, and I appreciate everybody who's been working on this.
Commissioner Gipson, we got about 2 minutes left. What are some enforcement mechanisms here that are on the table? I know we've got the Attorney General's office. There's tons of permitting and licensing in the agricultural industry. But what do you view, in your opinion, as the most viable enforcement mechanisms to prevent foreign ownership of American farmland?
I think Arkansas got it right. Arkansas is the only state in America that's actually enforced a law like this, and they required divestment of any illegal purchase. So they required a company, a Chinese-owned company, to divest all of its ownership in the state of Arkansas within a 2-year period. That is the best way to do it, basically to undo what has been happening. Other mechanisms would include fines, and the Mississippi bill has a fine process from first offense up to $250,000 to a third offense up to $5 million. So that's obviously potentially a deterrent effect. But I think the main thing is we need to understand food security is national security. And to the extent we sell 1 acre to our enemy countries, we are undermining our own ability to produce our own food, fiber, and shelter, and we're strengthening our enemies. And I think something really serious has got to be done about this. We can't wait on Congress to act. I mean, I wish they would, but at the end of the day, states can act, and Mississippi is beginning to act on this.
Yeah. Commissioner Gipson, thanks so much for coming on.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you.
All right, that's Commissioner Andy Gipson from the state of Mississippi, Ag Commissioner from the state of Mississippi. Agree 100%. We can't allow our foreign adversaries to own American farmland. It's as simple as that. They already own our pharmaceutical supply chain. They own our semiconductor supply chain. They own a large portion of our consumer goods manufacturing supply chain. We cannot let them get a hold of our food supply chain. See you next time.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.